We all have to start somewhere, right? And if I'm being 100% truthful, it wasn't until after I graduated from college and started my professional career that I really started diving into the world of personal finance with the desire to manage my money the best and most efficient way possible. And it was honestly complete luck that it happened. I graduated from college in 2019 and started my career in corporate America that following summer. And 8 or 9 months after I started working, the pandemic hit and I found myself working from home every day. And because I was stuck inside all day, every day, I did what everyone else was doing and I turned to YouTube for some quick entertainment. And a lot of the content I consumed was probably just garbage that I forgot within a few hours. But I started getting recommended videos by a guy who specializes in personal finance and helping people get out of bad financial mistakes. And you may have heard of him, but that guy's name is Dave Ramsey. So I clicked on the video and I was immediately hooked. So I spent the next couple months watching every video Dave Ramsey posted of random people calling into his show and getting advice on whatever mess they had created. And let me tell you, that awoke the beast inside of me. It made me realize how important being proactive about your finances is, and how if you put in just a little bit of work to set up a good financial system for yourself, it is so much easier to accumulate wealth throughout your life. Now, the good news is that I wasn't necessarily making bad financial choices before I found the world of personal finance content. I did not have any mountains of consumer debt or any student loans. I was career focused and I was already contributing 15% of my income towards my retirement. So it's not like I was in a dire circumstance, but I wasn't aware of some of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to finance and money. And once I learned more, I changed a lot of things about the way I thought about money. And I actually made some changes on how I was handling things. So here are 5 things I stopped doing when I became financially literate. And before we jump into any of the specifics, I of course have to add the disclaimer that none of this is specific investment advice. I'm not advising you on anything you should invest your money into. I'm just sharing some of my thoughts and perspectives on my own financial journey. So just always make sure, before investing your money in anything, make sure to do your own research and make sure you understand it fully before doing so. And also, if you like these videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button as well. Thanks. But let's get back to the topic. All right, the first thing I stopped doing when I became financially literate was thinking that I could beat the overall stock market by picking my own stocks. And it seems like every new investor thinks that they're going to be able to do just that. They're going to pick their own companies, they're going to pick their own stocks, and they're going to outperform general index funds that just track the performance of the overall market. And I briefly fell into this trap too. Not necessarily with my own retirement investing, but with any investing I did on the side, I was just buying single stocks instead of generic index funds because again, I thought I was better than the actual market and I thought it would offer me the best returns. And I still see so many people today just talking and gossiping about what stocks they're buying and holding. And a lot of content on this platform or on TV is centered around which stocks are hot and which stocks you should avoid. And honestly, I think this is like the most common trap for new investors. So I'm going to give you the tough news now. You are not better at picking stocks than the overall market. And statistically, you'd just be better off investing in index funds that just track the overall performance of the market, or at least various segments of the market over time. And that's okay, because I'm not better than the market either, so I don't pick my own stocks really. And if you want more proof, then according to the Spiva report, 92% of active large cap fund managers failed to outperform the S&P 500 over the last 15 years. Now, there's a couple things I want to break down from this. First, the key is that this is over 15 years. You might get lucky and you might beat the S&P 500 one year. It happens all the time. You pick a stock, it goes through the roof, and now you have a huge ego and you think you're the next Warren Buffett. You might even get lucky and outperform it for 2 years. But as the years go on, statistically your odds of doing that become less and less, and it's likely that the market's going to catch up and start to beat you. The percentage of people that have done that over a span of the last 15 years is just 8%. And the next thing I want to point out is that that is not 8% of everyday normal people. The Spiva report specifically calls out that 92 of active investment professionals failed to beat the S&P 500 over 15 years. Again, we're not talking about normal everyday people. We're talking about people who dedicate their careers and their lives to trying to do this. So if we had the statistics on the average everyday investor, I'm sure it's even worse. So if the professionals are not even beating the index funds, then the odds for people like us, it's even smaller. And don't worry, because like I said, I fell into this trap too. And buying stocks can be super fun. So I'm not saying to never do it. I'm just saying don't dedicate your entire investing portfolio to doing it. If you want to set aside like 5% of your portfolio to buy individual stocks and trade them and have fun, then go for it. I do that too. All right, let's move on. The second thing I stopped doing once I became financially literate was I stopped using income as a metric of success. And before you freak out, let me explain. When you hear people describe someone who's successful, what is usually the top descriptor that you hear them say about that person? It's usually that they make a lot of money, right? But in my opinion, it's better to measure financial success by asking the question, do I have a lot of money? It's common that most people associate being successful with just having a high income. When they plan their careers, when they think about their future, they usually have a target salary in mind that they want to accomplish. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, having income goals should be a part of your financial plan. But if you're tracking your success solely on the amount of money that you're bringing in, then in my opinion, you're not looking at the bigger picture. And again, this is a trap that I fell into. When I was growing up, my focus on financial goals was always about building a career and setting myself up to have a great income. This was my focus in college, and it was also my focus for a little while during my working life. And again, in college, you should be trying to pick a career that will pay you a lot. So I'm not saying that's bad. But I wanted to reach a level of financial success to support the lifestyle that I wanted to live. But I always picture myself by using my income to pay for a lot of those things and lifestyles that I wanted. And once I started down the journey of personal finance, I realized that I was looking at things the wrong way. I realized I would be better off measuring my financial success and my goals by looking at my total net worth instead of just looking at what I was bringing in every month. And it all really boils down to this. Income is not necessarily sustainable. There will be a day when you're no longer able to work. For most people, that's going to be in the distant future, and it could be 40 years away. But there's also the chance that it could be tomorrow. And if you're supporting a lavish lifestyle using only the income from your job, it's just not sustainable. And if you're not saving and investing for your future, you're setting yourself up to be in a really bad position. So instead, you should also focus on building up your assets and at the same time, keeping your debt and liabilities as low as possible. And if you build up enough assets or investments to support your lifestyle, you've now set up a system that will support you even beyond your working years. Also, I just want to point out the fact that people are not very good with their incomes. According to CNBC, more than half of Americans earning over $100,000 a year are currently living paycheck to paycheck. So I don't really like the narrative that just having a high income makes you financially successful. And I know I mentioned this a couple times, but I just want to make sure it's absolutely clear. I'm not saying not to focus on your income. That was a confusing double negative. Let me rephrase. You should focus on your income. It's still an important part of your finances. Income is important because it will allow you to pay for your expenses, and it's ultimately going to be the tool you use to save and invest. You're going to fund your investments, at least at first, through your primary income. The higher your income is, the more you're going to be able to do that, and the more you'll be able to enjoy life on the side. And if you build a good income and you make somewhat good financial decisions, and you keep that income free to invest and save, then you're going to build substantial wealth for yourself. And on the contrary, having a low income is going to make life much harder. And you're just going to be less likely to be able to build up any investments to be able to support yourself later on. So income is important, but when you're focusing on your financial goals, try to be more focused on what you're actually building instead of only focusing on what you're bringing in. And if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the like button if you want to. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, fine. Moving on with the video. The third thing I stopped doing once I became financially literate was using a financial advisor. Okay, I never actually had a financial advisor managing my investments, but once I started working, I did meet with a couple of them just because I wanted to maximize my investments, and I didn't know much about the world of investing quite yet. And this might be another one that's a little controversial, so just let me explain. You've just got to be careful because a high percentage of financial advisors are actually just salesmen who are making a commission based off of whatever you buy or you invest with them. This can be typical mutual funds and investments, but there's also salespeople out there under the title of financial advisors who are selling cash value life insurance and other crappy products that just don't give you that good of a return. And in my opinion, a lot of these services and products are just overpriced and not necessary. So for the purposes of this video, let's look at a hypothetical scenario of a typical financial advisor. So let's just say this would be someone you would go to manage your investments for you. Well, when you go to meet with this financial advisor, typically they make money off of you in two ways, and both are related to percentage-based fees. So the first way is that they'll charge you a percentage of the value of your entire investing portfolio as a management fee. A typical management fee is 1%, but it can definitely vary. For the purposes of this scenario, let's just say it's 1%. But the second way they make money is that the mutual funds you're investing in also have fees associated with them. So it's important that you realize that you're getting charged in multiple ways, and you'll usually only be clearly presented the initial management fee that we talked about, so that initial 1%. But make sure you understand and look at the documentation on any investments you make, because those will likely have fees associated with them as well. But for this example, let's also say that the fees associated with the mutual funds or investments is also 1%. So we have our first 1% fee, we have our second 1% fee, making for a total combined fee of 2%. So you're only being charged 2% on the entire value of your portfolio every year. And that's basically nothing, right? Well, no. A 2% fee is actually massive. And that's because of compound interest, but let me illustrate this for you using the following scenario. Let's say you make $80,000 per year and you want to invest 15% of your income towards your retirement every year. And let's assume you have an average annual rate of return on your investments of 8%. Over 40 years, you would have contributed $480,000 and your total investments would be a little more than $3.2 million, leaving you with a total profit on your investments of about $2.7 million. Now let's add in that 2% fee. Your total contributions would still be $480,000. That's just what you put in. But now your total investments would only be worth about $1.9 million, dropping your profit on your investments to $1.4 million. And if you're looking at those numbers, yes, you're seeing it correctly. Your profit with a 2% fee would be almost half of what your profit is with no fee. So yes, having a financial advisor can be very expensive. And that's because the 2% fee is essentially taking your rate of return from an 8% and dropping it down to a 6% return, which drastically reduces the effect that compound interest is going to have on your investments. Before we move on, here's a few quick points on this I want to call out. Having a financial advisor like this may make sense if you know you won't do any other investing on your own. Investing with a high fee is most likely better than not investing at all. So I recommend you just learn how to do it yourself and not have an advisor. But if you're scared and you know you're not going to do it, it might make sense. I still wouldn't recommend it. If you decide not to use a financial advisor, make sure you research your own index funds or target retirement funds for your own investing. But note that even if you do invest on your own, those funds will also have their own fees. Index funds typically have extremely low fees. They're basically as close to 0% as you can get. But make sure to check the fees of everything you invest in. And I would try to make sure that the fees are below 0.5%, but the lower, the better. If they're just index funds that are tracking the S&P 500, it should be like 0.07% or something super low. And the last point I want to make is that not all financial advisors are bad and some are better than others. If you do decide to meet with an advisor, you can find one that just has a fixed flat fee, meaning that instead of giving them a percentage of your portfolio, you would just pay them a one-time fee for their time. And it might seem expensive up front, but it's much better to pay someone a few $100s for a 2-hour conversation than to give someone millions of your investments over time. All right, this one's a little embarrassing for me, but number 4 on the list of things I've stopped doing since I became financially literate is leasing a car. Yep, the car I bought right out of college was a lease. The monthly payment was pretty low and I thought I was getting a good deal, but now that I've studied personal finance more, I now know that leases are just a trap that will keep you stuck in a car payment for the rest of your life. The reason I don't like leases is that unless you buy the car outright at the end of your lease, you don't actually own the car. And you're not working towards having a reliable car paid off. A lot of people who lease cars do it so they can get a new car every few years. And that just keeps them stuck with a monthly payment forever. And honestly, that was my plan at first. And it wasn't a decision that completely put me under. It was a reasonable car. It just was not the best way to maximize my finances. So it was a good learning opportunity. Once I wised up, I ended up purchasing the car, and I did end up financing it because it was back when I could get a really low interest rate. And I figured I would rather just invest my money in the stock market and keep it growing there. But don't get me wrong, I'm super on board with people using cash to pay for their vehicles, especially right now as interest rates are higher than they were previously. However, if you are going to finance a car, I really do like the 28-3 rule that the Money Guy show teaches, which states that if you do have to finance a reliable car, you should make a down payment of at least 20%. Your monthly car payment should not be more than 8% of your monthly income, and the length of the loan should not be longer than 3 years. And I think that seems like a good balance, as the end result is that you'll have a good, reliable car paid off fairly quickly. And this is especially good for young professionals who just started their careers, but they don't have a ton of cash reserves built up quite yet. However, when you do pay off that car, don't go buy another one. The goal is to have a paid off car for as long as possible so you don't have a monthly car payment, because that's just going to eat away any investing that you can do. All right, we're going to end on a simple but important one. The last thing I did once I became financially literate was caring about designer brands and other types of consumer goods. And that doesn't mean I don't buy stuff I enjoy. I like nice clothes, I like to have hobbies, but I've just changed my mindset and I don't worry too much about trying to look cool or about trying to impress other people, especially when it comes to designer clothes. I grew up thinking that designer brands were for people that were rich and powerful. And while those with wealth probably do have a few designer items, these brands profit off of people who cannot actually afford them. They're selling a status and a lifestyle that people desperately want to be a part of, even if they can't actually afford what they're buying. So there have been times when I've really wanted a nice watch, or I envisioned myself driving a Range Rover, but now I don't really care about those things as much. I would much rather focus on building wealth so that I can support myself, I can support my loved ones, and I can do things I enjoy that truly bring value to my life. And hey, when I have the excess money for it, would I want to buy a nice car? Sure. But it's definitely not the end goal, and I realize that a nice fancy car is not gonna make my life that much better. Remember when we talked about Americans living paycheck to paycheck? Well, that's why. People both consciously and subconsciously are trying so hard to keep up that they have a big house, they have nice cars, they go on fancy trips, but this is usually propped up by a mountain of debt, and people are just digging themselves in a deep hole. And it's a sad reality, but the good news is that it's really easy to choose not to get wrapped up in that. Just remember that the end goal is to build a life that makes you happy. Don't worry about what other people think. Just set financial goals that allow you to do what you want to do. And that's gonna do it for the video. Let me know what you think down in the comments. What are things that you've stopped doing once you became financially literate? I wanna hear about it, I wanna discuss. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'd really appreciate a like on the video. Thanks everyone.